Welcome to Cultimatum, the podcast uncovering the dark realities of cults and human trafficking. I'm your host, Anonymous Andrew, and each week we dive deep into the manipulation, control, and courageous escapes that define these worlds.
And I'm Melody, Andrew's co-host. Having experienced the depth of a cult firsthand, specifically the House of Yahweh, I am here as an advocate for fellow survivors.
The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not reflect the official policy or position of Cultimatum or its affiliates. The content discussed on this podcast are based on personal experiences and should not be construed as factual or legal advice. Neither the host nor the guest are liable for any statements made during the episodes. Listeners are encouraged to conduct their own research and seek professional advice where appropriate.
And before we dive into today's episode, we want to issue a trigger warning. Some episodes may cover explicit and potentially disturbing subjects such as sexual abuse, rape, human trafficking, suicide, and other sensitive subjects. Listener discretion is advised. Hey, Cultimatum fans, before we dive into today's episode, we need a tiny favor from each of you.
That's right. If you love what you hear, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify.
Your support helps us to reach new listeners and bring more awareness and attention to these important topics.
So tap that star rating, drop a quick review, and help us spread the word. It really does make a difference.
Thank you so much for tuning in and for your amazing support. We truly appreciate each and every one of you. Now let's get started with the show.
Here we go.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And I am your host, Melody. With me tonight is my co-host, Andrew.
Okay. Hello, Melody.
Yes, hello.
To our regular listeners, you will notice at the beginning of this episode, it's a little different because Melody opened up the episode, and there's a reason for that. So tonight we have a special guest, and I found this guest, and I wanted him to come on and tell his story. I'll tell you a little bit about our guest. His name is David Lennon. And David is the host of a podcast called Lost in the Grove, correct? Groove. Lost in the Groove. I don't know why I say Grove. I got Florida in my mind. Lost in the Groove. Dave, we're both part of a pod match, which is a podcast community. And that's where we get guests and hosts. They put people together, yada, yada. Anyway, Dave invited me on his podcast to interview me, and I went on and we had a great time. We talked about 90 minutes. And in that conversation, David was dropping that little hints that he was brought up in a cult. Now, mind you, I was being interviewed for my digital dating podcast, nothing to do with cults. And so I didn't see that coming. So bottom line is, at the end of the interview, I said, hey, Dave, you got to tell me more about this. And so Dave was brought up outside New York City in the Orthodox Jewish community, and he wants to come on and tell the story, and we can't wait to hear it. So Dave, say hello and welcome to the show.
Hi. How's everybody doing tonight?
We're doing great now that you're here. Why don't you take over?
Yes, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
Where do you want me to start?
Take us to your earliest memories of the cult. But let's not call it a cult just yet, because what do you want to call it?
I call it like the other side of my life, if that makes sense. Like, it's hard to be able to accept it as it is, because there are a lot of wonderful things that, like, I do have like good memories that came out of it. That's kind of like the messed up part about it, is like there's all this other messed up shit that comes along, and then you have that in your brain, like, hey, hang on a minute, but then why do I have all of this? I just try to take it as it is more than, with labels or anything, because like for me, I was raised in a home where my parents were mixed race. So my mom came from an Ashkenazi background. She came from third generation European. And And my dad was an immigrant that came from Casablanca, Morocco in 1970. So they got married young, they had kids, they became more religious, and they decided to move into the community, which is in Rockland County. They decided to raise a family there. And what I think that they may have not realized, being that they were desperate and trying to find connection and trying to be able to find a place that they could raise their family, what was in store. So growing up in that community, it's weird because I come from like a Middle Eastern background, but yet in the community, it's not very much accepted. So a lot of the schools, which are called yeshivas, that you go to, they're not geared to that group. They're only geared towards, either ultra-Orthodox, like Hasidic groups, or they're more geared to Ashkenazi, which are like European Jews. So you kind of don't fit anywhere. And I remember even from my youngest memories, my parents tried, like even from my youngest age, to put me in like a Stalin school when I was very, very young, like right after kindergarten, because my grandfather was around Stalin, which is an Hasidic sect. And they just put me in there because they didn't know any better. And I mean, there was no secular anything. They mainly focused the entire day of teaching you just Torah studies and all those things and things that you're not allowed to do and things that you're supposed to be doing. And I was like maybe like 5 or 6 years old. And they were talking about stuff regarding, I even remember like selling chickens. It just felt bizarre, because you feel like you're around these people that are supposed to be teaching you and they're supposed to be people that are supposed to care for you. But then the next minute, if you do something wrong, they drag you into a room and then they beat you with a ruler and then sit you in the corner and tell you how horrible you are as a human being. And then 3 seconds later, tell you that this is what God wants from you.
So I'm just going to clarify here, David. When you say selling chickens, are you talking about in the Old Testament laws where they talk about the laws around selling a chicken or something, or what could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So at a young age, they start teaching you a lot of what's called Tanakh. So that like consists of like the 5 books. They'll teach you what's called the Mishnah, which is kind of like a precursor to the Gemara, which is basically rabbinical studies. And some of the stuff that's in there is not really like stuff you should be telling kids. A lot of it's also extremely outdated. I even remember as a young age, like they would be talking about like even slaughtering of animals.
Yes.
And explaining the different reasons why we were allowed to sacrifice, and then the reason why now we're being punished that we can't do these sacrificial like sacrifices because we're in what they call a state of gullus, like a self-taught perjury for the stuff that we've done wrong as a people. And it's really strange because my parents really tried to be there for me, even though they weren't really the greatest parents. My dad was mentally and physically abusive. My mom was mostly mentally abusive. They clashed constantly on religious things. If it was around holidays, if it was about what one rabbi said and one other person said and how I was supposed to fit in. And, I come from a family where most of my siblings, they're in their 40s, and I'm in my 20s. So by the time like I was being raised, they were already gone. And my parents didn't really know what to do with me. So they decided to put me in what they call in the community because they don't recognize any learning disabilities.
David, let me jump in.
Yes, sorry.
So your siblings, how many siblings?
So I have a sister and I have 2 brothers.
So they're older than you?
Yes.
And they went through the same thing you did?
Yes.
Did they leave?
No, except one.
Oh, so one got out and
Yes.
2 are still in
the community.
the community.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they're in a different community. They're in Israel. Believe it or not, this also exists over there as well. Like this is not just something that exists in the United States. But when
well, Israel is the hub of the Jewish faith, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So because I was a kid that I was having difficulty fitting in, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. I had parents where I really couldn't communicate. I really didn't have anybody that I could really trust at a very young age. So in the community, when you have learning disabilities, so if you have like dyslexia, if you have ADHD, or if you have some form of autism or anything like that, there's no awareness of any of that exist over there, because their ideology is that you need to learn all of your Torah studies. You need to understand it clearly. You need to be able to pray 3 times a day. You need to be able to read correctly. Like, there's no excuses. So what they have there is what's called correctional schools. So it's a school that's like a yeshiva. It's a private school that has smaller classes, and they hire a social study worker. But the social study worker is a rabbi that works within the community, that he comes in and he sits down with you if, quote unquote, you have learning disabilities and you need things to work on. I had teacher after teacher that would throw me out, put me through detention, make my life a living hell. My parents gave me living hell because I was too difficult. I wasn't understanding. I was questioning too much. And to make matters worse, I had a principal that didn't like Sephardim. He was an Ashkenazi Jew that hated people that were a different skin tone than he was. And he put that towards every single one of his students that looked different. He picked on me horribly, even when I had a kid that bullied me for 7 years straight, every single day without failure. He'd steal my lunch. He would make fun of me. He would purposely embarrass me in front of, and I had no support structure at all. And I was constantly being told that, this is what God wants from you. You have to be more understanding. Why can't you be like this person? Why can't you be like... And like, I was so confused because I was under the notion that I am supposed to be, this good, this good Yid or Jew, whatever you want to call it. And I'm supposed to, be able to accept what God has put in front of me. And I was getting really, really, really tired of all of it. It got worse once I got into high school. I
have a quick question. Do you know anything about the bite model or Stephen Hassan? Have you heard of Stephen Hassan?
A little bit. Yeah.
I wonder how, because we were discussing whether or not growing up this way or this religion is a cult. Have you actually stood it up against the bite model to see if it qualifies according to the bite model as a cult by chance?
So the problem, it does. And the issue a lot of the times is because there's this almost sense of care where in the community, there's this idea of if you need help, somebody will take care of you. Somebody will be there, whatever you need, they'll take care of it. But the second you leave the community, which I did, and I felt this immediately, I got completely cut off. It took me 6 years to rekindle my relationship with my mom. I lost all connections with my family completely.
Well, just that right there is cult-like.
Yes,
every cult does that. If you walk away or say you would like to leave, they show you the door, or they will, then make your life miserable.
But here's the thing: what they do
shun
also,
you.
Right.
But what they do is also, and I have a close friend of mine that this happened to them too. This is what they do, and this is not all community. They're all different in different ways. But what they'll do is they'll tell you, you can leave, you can go, and they will openly let you leave. But the thing is, the second you walk out, that's it. They cut you off completely. There's no calls. There's no nothing. They won't respond. Like a good friend of mine, and I had this happen to me too. I had recently. I took care of my grandfather passed away earlier this year. And growing up, I barely spent any time with my grandparents. There was a lot of feud between my parents and my mother's parents. And my mother's family had nothing to do with me once I left the community, like at all. They completely cut me off. No one would call me. No one would respond. Nothing. My grandfather became really sick last year in July, and I was going into school, and I was living down here, and they're living here. And my mother suggested for me to take care of my grandfather, and I did. And they are religious, and we did have, but I tried to be very respectful. I didn't try to get into any. And then my family on my mother's side started talking to me.
Wow.
They started like having a relationship, and it hurts because it's like you couldn't see me before. Like it takes for my dying grandfather in order for you to reach out. It's just how horrible and how like you could choose religion over your own family. That's what hurts the most.
Well, and it's almost like, if I were you, I would feel like you almost had to earn that respect from them by doing what you're doing. Yes,
Yeah.
it's not unconditional. It's basically like, well, we should do this now because he's taking care of grandpa.
David, you have some, I'm going back to the interview that we had on your podcast, and I'm remembering, and it might have been during the recording or after, but number one, I think you told me there was some sexual abuse.
There's a school in Muncie. That's where it's located. It's specifically in Viola Park. I went there right after Stullen. That was the school that I was in before. This was kind of like elementary, first, second grade time. It's called Base Mikra. And the guy that was running the school, he was arrested and fined and proven to be guilty of his crimes for molesting kids in his school.
Quick
Yeah.
question about that. Is that, I mean, how did the community itself handle? Did they turn him into the authorities, or
No.
were they protecting
No.
him?
They
Okay.
protected him. He's still in
Okay.
the community, still working. Nothing has happened. Like, I told Andrew about this. My experience with him was extremely creepy and extremely vivid because I've had a few interactions with him. And usually when you were punished, the way that they used to do detention, you'd go to Rabbi Bodenheimer's office. And when you went into his office, he would lock the door. He would sit by his desk and he would sit you by his window. He had a chair and he used to stare at you. Just stare at you. Then he would come over to you and then he would start caressing your cheek. And then he would start rubbing your shoulder. And then he would sit, like, the man was a creep. And he was not the only person in the school. He was not the only person like this in the school. I had another teacher of mine that he had this thing that whenever he would want to punish you, he would take you to this little room. He would hit you with a ruler and then start caressing your cheek and then start touching you from the behind. Never fired. He's still working there today.
That's what's going to be my next question. Is this another situation where the community as a whole, or the group, or the cult, whatever we want to call it, is protecting them? Because that is what that I would say, Andrew, that this sounds like it's another a red flag that this is a cult, because that's what all the cults that we have interviewed, they do. They protect predators because they don't want to tarnish the reputation of the organization.
No, and again, the blatantness awareness, for example, so there's different rabbinical sectors, but they all kind of correlate and communicate across because there's different cities within Rockland County. But this idiocracy of, especially when it comes to kids that have learning disabilities and, are not able to process things the same way. I can tell you from my own personal experience, I know at least one person that has committed suicide because of this. He felt like no one would understand him, no one would care for him, so he ended his life. And it's heart-wrenching because even his own family cut him off because he didn't want to be learned. He didn't want to sit in yeshiva. He didn't want to be that kind of kid that can... I mean, how could you put such kind of pressure on somebody that clearly cannot learn like everybody else? And now they have these programs. It's horrible.
I see. You're this is my favorite part of episodes. To the audience watching our guest, the body language shows us how emotional it is for them. And we've talked about this in the outros.
It's hard. It is.
Oh, I'm sure. And I want to touch upon something, and we do have plenty of time.
Yeah.
But there was something else that I don't know if we're going to be jumping ahead or we'll come back to it. But you are so the podcast that you have, Lost in the Groove, is an artistic podcast.
Yes.
Where you have guests on and you talk a lot about the artistic world. Let's just leave it at that for now. And there's also a side of you, which I'm not going to mention unless you mention it, that it defines a particular a role inside of you. And where I'm going with this is you were repressed. In your you weren't able to express who you truly were in your child years. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
We're talking about sexuality, right?
Yes.
Okay. when it comes to conversation, especially like around even heterosexuality, even homosexuality, these are things that are not discussed. Depending on what sect you're in, for example, I come from the Orthodox, so usually when you're kind of around the age of starting to get married, they do what's called chassan classes. So they'll have guys that will come in. I'm not even kidding. This is a real thing. They'll sit down with a rabbi, and then the rabbi will explain to them how to have sex with a woman. And there'll be a whole like lecture in a class, and it's supposedly rabbinical. So that's when guys are supposed to know about this, is like right before marriage. So when it comes to the topics like even like homosexuality, like I remember growing up, is you hear two things. One, it's abomination in front of God. The second thing is that being gay means that when you die, you go to hell, and your punishment is you sit in front of a bunch of dark angels, and for all of the kids that you've wasted, your semen, they'll point at you and make fun of you for eternity. So those are the two most common things that they will tell you. So you never talk about sex. You never talk about like any of it. It's never discussed. I remember even from my earliest memories, like even in elementary school, I struggled a lot of times in school because I was surrounded by guys and developing, like becoming a teenager. And I don't know what the hell is going on. And I'm confused out of my mind. And
so you were being told by, I don't know what age, that they started having these sex classes where you, by the way, in most of our cults, it didn't, Melody, correct me if I'm wrong, except for that pamphlet you got, they don't really teach you sex, right?
Well, and if they do, that it's very controlling. They're going to tell you what you can and can't do, what
right.
Exactly.
Specifically, like
Yes.
what kind of sex
Yes.
is acceptable, what is not acceptable, literally down to like positions or, they're
exactly.
very controlling.
But we had somebody on the other night, just a guest, which hasn't been aired yet, I don't think, or by the time this is there, maybe. But she said that she went from 20 years old into a marriage when she couldn't kiss the guy, and all of a sudden on their wedding night, she had to have sex, and she had no idea. So I don't know, that might have been the Amish woman.
That was Amish, and that's coming out
Amish.
This weekend. Yeah, that'll be dropped this Sunday.
So at least here, at least here they gave you a little bit of a sit down and a sex. But what David is talking about is they address homosexuality, and then of course they punish you for it.
Yeah.
And you're going, so your hormones and your teenage adolescent going through, I guess, what, you're 13, 14, 15, you're separated, right? The men and the women, the girls are separated, different schools?
They go to different schools, yeah. Which, by the way, if anybody knows anything about gay chemistry, I think that's the worst combination you could possibly put developing teens that are going through that. My biggest issue, like I said earlier, like because I had learning disabilities and my parents, they didn't really know what to do, and there really is no structure. So their idea is what, again, is called correctional schools. So when I went to high school, I went to boarding correctional schools. One's, for example, where you go to a boarding house. So it'll be either a rabbi's house or somebody that's in the community. In my case, it was in Baltimore. And then you go to your yeshiva. They'll have a building you come in for your classes. Most of your curriculum, this is high school. Most of your curriculum is Hebrew studies. They'll teach you Gemara and different things. And then you have maybe an hour to 2 hours of secular studies. I was in awe in the place that I was living in, because from the very start, the place I was in, that was in Baltimore, I was with kids that were on drugs. They came from broken homes. Some of them had violent charges. Okay, we're talking about people that are 14, 15 years old. They had charges already on the record. And I'm sitting there in front of this rabbi that spent the entire year that I was there telling me of how bad of a Jew I was, how I disgrace my family, and how I don't pray the way that I'm supposed to, how I focus on too many things that are secular and not religious. I reached out to my mom, and I begged her to come out and get me out of there. She did. And it was just one hellhole after the other. My parents...
Was that around 2018 or?
No, this is 2014.
2014, okay.
Yeah, 2013, 2014. My parents decided to put me in another boarding school in Bronx. So to make I'll kind of explain it a little bit, but basically the school was run by a man that was a part of the Satmar Mafia. So some of the Hasidic groups, they work in doing illegal activities in order to bring in money to the community. If you want, I can talk about that. But one of the things that they do is they'll build schools, or they'll build, anything pertaining to education, and then they'll use it as write-offs to collect money from the government. And there's different ways of how they do this. So the guy that I went through, he ran basically like a high school grade, like equivalent. And therefore, he was able to get grants and money from the government. Problem was, like, the man was on the run. He was already, like, on the FBI's, like, warrant list and all that stuff. And I was in a place where I was in a house that was falling apart with broken beds, with guys that were on bath salts, dealing drugs, doing alcohol, abusing me because they had a feeling I was gay.
This was a Hasidic community?
So he was Hasidic, but he was running a correctional boarding school, like yeshiva for high schoolers.
For the wayward. So you were considered wayward.
Yeah, I was a delinquent.
Delinquent, okay.
And is that mostly because of your disability? Or was there... Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
They wouldn't accept me. They wouldn't accept me in any other place because I had these disabilities. I was literally denied from like 15 other places.
So you're just thrown in with troublemakers and lawbreakers, and so how is this supposed to help you? I mean, that's just going to expose you to more things.
Well, that's the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Around that time, it was also really hard because I was still struggling with my sexuality and dealing with a bunch of these guys where there were times they would run into my room, rip off my sheets and pull off my pants and start calling me femboy. It was hell.
And is that because you had told them that you were like
the guy that was running the place, he went ahead and he spread a rumor. So they bullied me even more for the last 5 months that I was there. So
you never came out before that, or during, when I say before that, in the other school, or like before 2014, or when they put you into this delinquent school?
I didn't even know. I mean, the first sexual experience I had was when I was about 14. It was with somebody that was 18 years old, and it was with a guy.
I'm going to say something that I don't know if it's political correct or not. And you can tell me, and if we have to, we can take it out.
Sure.
But you don't come across to me as effeminate. You don't come across. As a matter of fact, when you told me you were gay, it didn't shock me, but it did. I kind of raised an eyebrow, like, oh, because in 2020, in the years that we're living now, gay pride is huge. So there's people who are gay who wear it on their sleeve. Is that the term? Or they wear it, wear. They will wear the certain clothes. They will wear. They will be very proud of. You don't exude that. You don't.
No, because I don't come from it. I mean, when I left the community, it's weird. I spent most of my time around artists and hippies, if you want to call that, nomads. I kind of figured out who I was around those people. So I kind of became a very I know this is like a very a very freestyle hippie, if that makes any sense.
Because your parents were hippies, I guess.
In a way, yeah. My parents were very free spirited. It's the problem was there's a term in the community which is called Baal Tshuvas. So Baal Tshuvas are people that return to the community. And my parents are the product of this. And what happens is that they come in with no direction. So my dad, being a Sephardic Moroccan Jew in an Ashkenazi community with Germans and Lithuanians, he had to assimilate. So there were a lot of the times where he could pray by his prayers, but he'd also have to assimilate to whoever the rabbi was in the area, or who the rabbi was in that synagogue, or whatever they're saying. So there was this constant conflict with the two of them where their logic more fell on religion than actual reality most of the time.
Interesting.
Yeah. When it came to high school, I was really starting to figure things out for myself, and I was really struggling with my parents. My dad and I was constantly in conflicts. We could not get along. My mom, we were constantly arguing. My brother, he lived in Israel for most of the time that I was being raised. So he told my parents for me to come out. I came out to Israel. He was in a school. It was a post-high school program. This was around 2015. I was starting to get to know him.
Israel was who?
With my brother.
Okay.
He was a rabbi at the school. He was a teacher, so he's one of my teachers that I had. So what they have in the religious world is called a post-high school program. So you'll go to Israel for about a year or 2 years. They still teach you the Talmud and the Torah and all of those things, but they'll do some activities, and you're supposed to explore Israel. That's the idea, until
the actual country Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I go there, and I'm already questioning my faith, and I'm already questioning my own sexuality because I'm trying to figure myself out. And then I end up in an environment with guys that are from my same background. They are Sephardic. So we're all Middle Eastern. I'm Moroccan. Some of them are Egyptian. Some of them are from Lebanon. Some of them are from Syria. So I'm able to interact with people that are similar to my own culture for the first time in my entire life, because I was raised in a very either Hasidic or Ashkenazi community. But they turned out to be, if not more shallow and more closed than the people that I was raised with. They ostracized you in the sense where if you didn't have money, if you didn't fit their status, if you didn't fit their direction, you weren't welcome. And there were a few guys that were there that started to figure out things. It was very hard for me to be able to hide it.
So 2015-ish, you went to this delinquent school where they were doing all these bad things like bath salts and whatever.
2014, 2015, yeah.
Right. And when did you go to Israel?
The end of 2015.
Okay. So
going into 2016, yeah.
How much time there? 1 year, 2 years?
I was there for a year and a half. So I came back to the States in 2017. I came back in May, around that time.
But while you were in Israel is when you came out.
I didn't come out by choice. So what happened was somebody in the school that I was close with told my brother. So I wasn't raised with my brother, and he was under this inkling that he already had a relationship with me as if we were brothers for 20 years. Even though I'm hello, I'm still getting to know you, man. You're not a stranger to me, you're family, but I don't know you. So he pulls me into a room, and he gives me this whole conversation about on how I have a disease and how I need to fix my sickness. So I asked him what I'm talking about, and he says, well, one of the classmates was on your computer, and they found stuff on there. I'm not going to go any further. And I was sitting there froze, and I didn't know what to say. And he says, it's okay. You don't have to admit anything. I already know. He says, well, I want you to understand something. I said, understand what? He says, well, you know that this is an abomination, and the purpose of a man, especially in Judaism, is to be able to get married with a woman and be able to provide for their family and raise children. This is not a way of being able to do this. I said, well, other people have different life choices. He says, well, you have to understand that homosexuality is just like somebody that runs around the streets that are naked. I said, what? He says, yeah, well, because when somebody's mentally ill, are you going to tell the person running around naked to just keep doing that? Or are you going to tell them, hey, you're naked and you need to be taken care of? It gives me this whole conversation, tells me that I need to get, I need conversion therapy and I need to get fixed and there's something wrong with me. So he gives me this number to this organization. I call up the guy, and the guy, I explained to him the whole situation. I said, do you speak to my brother? He said, yeah, I did speak to your brother. And I told him the whole thing. And I mentioned about gay conversion therapy. He says to me, gay conversion therapy? I never mentioned that. And I said, what do you mean? He says, no. He says, we have a support group over here. We help people that are gay and also Jewish to figure out their own sexuality and figure out their own self so they'll be able to live your own normal life. I said, as gay? He says, yeah, why not? So I got off the phone, and I know this sounds like a movie, but it's not. It started to rain, and I went. There was a stairwell that was there was a terrace. There was the dorm room on one side, and there was the other side is where they had the synagogue, which is also where they had the teaching. So I went by the stairwell. There was a door, and I sat down there, and I just started crying. And I called up my other brother. This is a brother that currently still lives in California. I came out he didn't respond. My brother was not religious at the time, but he was closeted, so we didn't really know what was going on. He said to me, he says, okay. And? I said, what do you mean, and? I just came out to you. He said, you're still my brother. I said, yeah. He says, okay, so what's the problem? I said, nothing's a problem. And I just I stopped crying and I just...
You expected kickback or yeah. Okay.
But he was very welcoming. He was very warm. He helped me a lot to try to figure out who I was, to try to be able to get me in the right support groups. But my other brother...
I assume this is the other brother who left, who was not part of the community anymore. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
He was also the one that told me recently, which is how I started to click, that we were raised in a cult, because we had a conversation for over an hour and he just kept on telling it to me. And I told him, I said, you're crazy. And he sat me down for a good half hour explaining things. And when I got off the phone with him, I just couldn't breathe. That's the way I could I had just a really hard time breathing and just staying aware and alert. But my experience in Israel kind of allowed me to kind of figure out who I was as a person. And I came back to the States. I went in with, I stayed by a friend. That didn't work out. And then I had to go live in with my parents. And that was complete hell.
Did they know? Did you come out to them or they didn't know?
No.
No.
I came out to my mom a few months later. My mom, I love her very much, but she's not the most mentally stable individual, something that I've had to learn as an adult. She doesn't understand that you can't share everything with family members. So I told her in confidence, and she went in and she told my dad. And then my dad started becoming more violent, and it was becoming very, very uncomfortable. My dad used to get physical. He would pick up his hand. He would threaten you. I went back to Israel. Crazy enough, my brother and my cousin convinced me to live there. And I stayed there until about 2019. That's really when I started to realize where I came from, who I really was as a Jew, really be able to appreciate my ancestry. Something that's been hard for me to swallow is the fact that my dad comes from 700 years of Moroccan ancestry, and his entire family are traditional Jews. They do traditional Moroccan customs. They drive on Shabbos. They're not religious, but they're traditionally still hold on to their heritage. And I grew up in an environment where all of that was assimilated, wiped off, non-existent. I'm not blaming my dad. Everybody makes their own choices, but it's a hard pill to swallow.
So when would you say that you officially left the Hasidic sect of what you were brought up in prior 2014, 2015? Even though you went to Israel, you must have...
2017.
So 2017, you officially...
Yeah.
Did you leave, and I think I know the answer to this, you didn't leave the Jewish faith, you just left the Hasidic community.
I left the Orthodox community.
The Orthodox community.
Yeah, I'm not religious in any shape or nature, but if anybody asks me, I will say proudly that I am an Arab Jew.
You identify as a Jew. Okay.
Yes, I'm proud of being a Jew, because the thing that I realize is that you can take something that can be a part of a culture, because I understand this from my dad's upbringing, coming from Morocco and having that history, and you could turn something so beautiful like that and then turn into something where you try to control and manipulate and put people in places, even when...
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between the Jewish religion and being Jewish, meaning that,
yes.
I'm French. I have French in me. I don't speak French, but I know that that's part of my culture, part of who I am. But that doesn't mean that I necessarily make that my everyday part of life, or that So
I'm
I
half
think
Italian and I hate pizza. I mean, I should say I hate pizza, but I don't eat spaghetti, and I'm not, I'm not the forgot. I don't. I'm not Italian.
Yes, exactly.
I'm American. I'm a mutt. So David, take us. There's a few more things I want to cover, because he's got a fascinating journey. So you left the Orthodox. Let's talk about your art, your artistic journey. You also, and I want you to talk about your podcast a little bit, and then and I think you talked to me about this, and maybe, I don't know if it's still active, but you have another podcast called The American Groove with Carissa Andrews, or is that defunct?
That is defunct. And
okay.
It's an interesting story. So one of the first things I did when I got out of the community, I started trying to be able to build friendships, particularly with women. And to this day, majority of my friends are females. They're not males.
Which is typical in the gay community,
Yeah.
by the way. Yes.
And what was interesting about Carissa was, like, this was 2019, so this is like literally a few years right after I left the community. I was still like figuring myself out, and she was also figuring herself out. She was going through her whole different life change, and we came from two completely different backgrounds. She grew up Protestant in Iowa, like
Bible Belt. Yeah.
Bible, but like completely different. And I loved that. Like, there was something about her that I constantly felt this kindle between her, and it just soured, I mean, our lives changed. We moved, and something I've realized as I've gotten older is that relationships, you can't hold on to them always. Sometimes relationships are there for short times, and that's okay. I think it's the time that you spend and the work that you do and the things you gain from the other person and the memories.
There's some poem called Relationship Season. And, for every, God, if I knew this, we were going to do this.
One of the lines is like a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it basically says that, yes, that people come into your life for different reasons. Some people come in for a reason. Some people come into your life for a season. And some people are there for a lifetime. Yes.
Yeah.
And you do learn that as you go through life.
Okay, so then take us. So that you tried something with Carissa, and you guys, it didn't work. So take us to when you started Lost in the Groove.
So I started Lost in the Groove in May of 2021. Like I said, with everything that I've been through, I constantly had this anger inside of me that I just need to talk, because for so long I felt so restricted of being able to. Anything I said can get me in trouble, or, if I don't say something the right way. And I just I wanted to be free. So I had a therapist when I was, I had her for a short period. She was a fantastic therapist. She was a flower child from the 70s. God bless this woman. She got me through a lot of stuff. But one thing she told me, she says, if you have something to say it. I said, what do you want me to do about it? She says, well, you could write letters. You could go on a radio, or you could just start a podcast or whatever. And that stuck with me. And then a while down, I had this smoke shop. This guy, his name was Mike, that we were close with. And we had these deep conversations. We had just one day, I said, man, we should make a podcast. And I already had like an idea with Carissa before, like we were talking about podcasts, and like I came up with a name and like was lost in the groove. So I said, Mike, let's do this. So we made the podcast, and from the very beginning, I tried, to like be the most perfect, and I was struggling. And he kept on telling me, he's like, listen, this is an art. It takes a while to get used to, like you'll fall in love with the craft. And I remember when I had the first person I had on this podcast that was also like me, that left the community, and we had a conversation. I left that conversation, and something snapped. This was about maybe right after Mike left. This was probably like around 2023. Something clicked. And I said to myself, like, this is something that I wanted to do. I wanted to be at least somebody that came out of that community, because I have friends that have also left the community and trying to do the same thing, where just to be able to give people an opportunity to talk, it hurts me so hard to even think about the times of how like I was hurt because of something I said. And I'm like, what did I do wrong? I think allowing people to have that freedom of expression, just having that open conversations, like I've learned so much more about people being outside of that community than I've ever had in my entire life.
You were living in a bubble. Yeah. You were living in an echo chamber where you were just hearing one perspective, and that definitely screams cult.
I see it as, that's like I said earlier, like I see it as another version of myself. Like, I view the person back then died, and then another person was born. It's hard. Like that friend of mine, we were talking about this, and they said the same thing, where it's so hard to put yourself back in there, because it's so painful to remember. You have to separate it in your brain, because how else are you supposed to function?
Yeah, it's
David,
there's actually a name for it. It's called religious trauma syndrome.
yeah.
Wow, that's okay.
So we got to begin to wrap it up, David, but we do have a couple of questions that we'd like to ask.
Yes.
And to the audience, David is getting very emotional right now, which is why I love doing this. But unfortunately, it's not on video, but it just shows the power of the journey that
Yes,
these ex-cult members have gone through, the transformations that they've gone through in their lives, from their family, their friends, the rejection they've have endured. Yeah,
all of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of answered this question already. Where are you with your faith today? So you identify as a Jew, but you're not very religious. Amelia, you want to ask your question? There was another question I wanted to ask. You want to follow up with your question?
Yeah, I can ask my question. What we usually ask people, and I don't know if you've thought a lot about this, just because of it sounds like you're still in the process of trying to deconstruct
That's
some
my other
of
question. Yes.
some of that trauma that you've went through, and actually figure out even what you believe now at this point. But the question that I usually ask at the end of an episode is, if you know of somebody else who's in a similar situation, and you can maybe it's specifically Judaism or in another kind of cult, or thinking about joining a group like that, do you have any specific advice that you would give them?
Trust your gut and be able to think your own mind, and realize that just because you have people around you that are not loving you the way that you want to be loved or cared for, doesn't mean that those people don't exist. They do exist. They're just not around your circle right now.
Where would you say that you are in your deconstruction? So I think you told me when we interviewed that you were 26 or 27?
27
So
next year.
you left around 2018, I think you said?
2017. So I was
2017.
I was 18. Yeah.
About 10 years you've been out officially of the Orthodox community. Where are you in your deconstruction? I can see the emotion still in there. And this is a complicated, very convoluted question, because it's not just somebody who left a cult. It's a gay person who left a cult and who was persecuted in the entire journey through that. So you have two obstacles that you had to overcome.
Yeah, and the truth is, and it's a hard thing to swallow, a lot of people like myself that has those double, with the sexuality and also leaving the community, most of them are not alive. They don't reach 26, or they don't make it too long. Most of them either overdose or they commit suicide. I know this because I've heard enough
about that.
Yeah, I've heard enough stories and dealt with it enough myself. So
we talked about that.
I think the thing that's kept me the strongest is not to be isolated, is to find people that I genuinely find really good connections with and make really good relationships out of. And even the people that come around my life, whether it be maybe school or come by, just to be able to be happy, the fact that I have my own life. I'm able to do what I need to, be who I want to be, and I'm not restricted. I'm really thankful for that. But
so,
yeah.
Would you say that your podcast has also helped you in your journey?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's been, honestly, it's been one of my therapies. I don't talk about it, but it is.
And one last question. I think I remember you telling me that you were moving soon.
I need to move. Yeah. I currently living with my mom while I'm in school, but I don't know where I'm ending up. But my goal is, very simply, is just to be able to figure out who I am more, to be able to learn from different mistakes or stuff I come along the way. The thing I love about life the most is when you fail and when you make mistakes, because I think that's where you learn the most, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I agree.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yes.
100%.
And that's the same across the board. Doesn't matter if you were in a cult, not in a cult. Doesn't matter if you're gay or straight. It's life. Life is a learning journey.
100%.
David, I can't thank you first for inviting me on your podcast, because we would not have met otherwise. Mm-hmm. And So thank you for that. And this was meant to be, because you invited me, and then for a dating podcast, but the cult came out of you and in discussion, and then here you are, and the circle completes, or maybe I don't know. I feel like there's still one more triangle, whatever,
or polygon.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. It was very good to meet you, and thank you, Andrew, for doing some of the recruiting.
Yeah.
So
Felt
it
good.
worked out really good. It was a good episode. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you soon, David, okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye-bye. We want to thank David so much for coming on the show and sharing his story with us. Wow, Andrew, you did a good job. That was a good recruit. Andrew did good. That was a good episode.
It was actually my first time. I think since day one, I've always opened up the podcast. So
yes,
yeah, it was fun.
Yes,
a little different.
Yes, and we talked about this a little bit off mic, but I was a little surprised that that he was getting as emotional as he was, because I figured kind of with his own podcast that he must talk about this all the time, and he's been doing his deconstructing, but it sounds like he doesn't dive deep into his past or,
Right.
his experience with his religion very much on his current podcast.
So when he interviewed me on his podcast, and at some point there was, I forget whether it was on mic or off mic, when I found out that he said when he heard that I had a cult podcast, he opened up to me and he goes, "Oh, I was in a cult," and we talked a little bit about it, and there was I could tell he got emotional then. So apparently when I just asked him at the end, where are you in your deconstruction? He's not done yet, obviously.
No.
He's 27, which means that 2/3 of his life he spent in the Orthodox community, which really fucked with his head. It really did, if you think about it. And throw on top of that, at the age of 14, 15, 16, when the adolescent hormones are spinning around our bodies, the females and males, and the girls are looking at boys and boys are looking at girls, all of a sudden you throw in the gay person who is conflicted and confused and doesn't know how to feel, because his feelings are not like the guys. So I can only imagine the guys.
Then you add in there the separation that they added in there, where the boys and the girls are separated.
Yep. And he was also not with his parents. I mean, there was so much going on with him.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The fact that, and to the audience, in case anybody, which sometimes we get people that say things either in social media, I pointed out that he was getting emotional for a reason. And we don't video these sessions. We would like to, for technical reasons, and also for anonymity reasons. We don't video because we want to hide the guest's identity many times. Some guests would like to be on video. The point is that since day one, you've heard me talk about watching the body language of our guests, and I can see the discomfort that they're in. And again, tonight, David was clearly having some moments of discomfort.
Yes.
And that tells me how serious it was for them, and where they are how far they are along in their deconstruction process. So, David, thank you so much for coming on and sharing that vulnerability with us tonight.
For sure. Yes. That was, there was a lot of emotion there. You can tell, like you said, he's definitely still in that process of deconstructing. And I think that, the fact that he wanted to come on the show and share tells me that he wants to talk about this, even though it's hard. And that's what he did. And we appreciate that. And we know it wasn't easy for him. So, David, thank you once again for coming on the show and sharing your story with us. And as always, thank you to all of you for tuning into Cultimatum. We appreciate your support in our mission to expose the truth and highlight the voices of survivors.
Okay, before we continue with the outro, we did say we were going to do this. As of today's recording, which is July 2nd, the DA of Michigan, and Melody, help me out here, issued arrest warrants for Jeff and Shalia from the Twin Flames universe. And it was announced, I think, maybe yesterday. So by the time you hear this, it'll be a month old and maybe old news, or you guys will know all about it. But this cult podcast would be remiss if we did mention that.
That's
because
true, yes.
as everybody knows, I have been after Twin Flames for years, and I cannot wait to see what these arrest warrants and
Yes.
what the charges are going to be.
I think it was at this time just search warrants were executed on Tuesday.
Okay.
Tuesday, July 1st.
But
by multiple branches of law enforcement, including AG special agents, the U.S. Department of Labor Office of the Inspector General, Michigan, and Michigan State Police, and by members of both the Leelanau County and Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office. So multiple
how long have I been bitching and moaning? When is law enforcement going to do something? And now they have finally did something, and I just can't wait to find the outcome. So hopefully we'll keep you updated. If anybody listening, if you're interested, I would imagine that we're not going to be your source of news, but you'll know before we do. But we do post in our Facebook groups, and so as we get the news, we'll pass it on to you.
Yes, and I'm just going to do I just want to do one shout out. I want to do a shout out to my neighbor who sent me the link. She was the first one to tell me.
Yes,
Stacy. Stacy, thank you so much for sending that my way and keeping us apprised of what was going on. So we appreciate that.
Well, if we're going to go down that road, this morning, Melody texted me, you're not going to believe this. My neighbor, Stacy, just found this and she gave it to me. She knew that I would be excited, and I was at work, and I could barely, what's the word?
Retain
my take. Yeah, because I was like, I ran into the bathroom to read the news article and try to figure out wow, what's going on here? So, okay, more on the Twin Flames as that unfolds. If you are enjoying the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify, and don't forget to follow, share, and keep listening to all of our latest episodes.
You can also follow Cultimatum on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for more content and updates.
Don't forget to join our Facebook group, Cultimatum Podcast, where we dive deeper into these important topics.
And if you are a cult survivor and you're looking for additional support, we recommend joining the Cult Escape and Recovery group on Facebook.
If you're interested in more of my work, check out my other two podcasts, Digital Dating, where I unpack the complexities of relationships in today's world, and the Weekend Rant podcast, where I tackle life's frustrations with no filter. And
that's true.
All I'm going to say.
And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you would like to share with us, you can feel free to email us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
Want to support the show? You can help us cover production costs by buying us a cup of coffee. In the show notes, just follow the link and it'll take you to a page where you can donate $5 or $10 to the show. Believe me, a little bit helps. It goes a long way. And thank you to those who have already donated.
And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.